What do you want to do? What will my board reward? What will my CEO reward? It is its own kind of terror, managing uncertainty. But I'm telling you, if you are a manager at whatever level, that should be your job. Your job is to manage the uncertainty of the context so that the people getting the work done can manage the uncertainty of the problem. And it's easy to say and brutally hard to do. Because this is the thing I think this, again, fair to be honest about. This is hard. Everything I'm saying is hard, kind of in line with what I am saying, which is stop being shallow and go deep.
Dr. Vivienne Ming is a theoretical neuroscientist, inventor, author, and serial entrepreneur, often described as a professional mad scientist. She's founded and led 5 companies, including SoCoast Labs, an independent research institute exploring the future of human potential. Her work has been featured in the Financial Times, The Atlantic, The Guardian, Quartz, and the New York Times. Vivienne has developed AI systems to predict manic episodes in bipolar patients and even reunite orphaned refugees with extended family. She has served as a visiting scholar at UC Berkeley's Redwood Center for Theoretical Neuroscience, and today contributes as chief scientist at Possibility Sciences, chair of the advisory board at Neurotech Collider Lab, and visiting professor at UCL's Global Business School for Health. Vivienne, thank you so much for joining us here today on Innovators Inside. It's going to be such an exciting conversation.
I'm looking forward to all of it.
Oh my gosh, I am too. This is going to be super fun. So we're gonna get started with some warm up. We love playing games with our guests, and I think Lane, why don't you take us away on our first little game?
Okay, perfect. So this is what we like to call our rapid fire section. So I'll probably pick one or either of you, and I'll ask a question and try to just answer with the first thing that pops into your head. Usually these lead to some discussions or some debates. We've had really intense discussions about microwaves in the past, but yeah, so first question for Vivienne. If you could have dinner with any innovator, past or present, who would they be and why?
My fast answer is that's not the way my brain works. I'm never looking for the person to have dinner with. I don't have, apart from maybe dinner with Aaron Burr to just figure out what the hell he was doing in Mexico way back when. That sort of thing. It's the ideas that get me excited and drive me forward. So whoever has the most transformative ideas, and unfortunately, most of the famous innovators aren't really the innovators. They built the systems that allowed it to happen. So there's my really honest answer. I'd have dinner by myself and I'd read science papers.
I love that.
That's so good. Now maybe you could sit quietly reading your paper across the table from Da Vinci, reading the same set of papers and coming up with crazy batshit ideas that may or may not ever work.
Yeah, it's obviously he threw a lot of things onto parchment, and not every corkscrew helicopter was actually going to fly. But he was there in the early days. I look at people that were multi-time successful. Clearly Einstein, as many really hardcore physicists might point out, other people were thinking similar thoughts at the time. Maybe he wasn't the greatest mathematician of his age or anything along those lines, but 3 times photoelectric effect, for which he actually won the Nobel Prize, and relativity and general relativity. Like when you see people being able to come up with something truly original multiple times, and that first one, the photoelectric effect, for which he is not famous but justifiably should be, that is innovation. The Gilded Age thought they'd figured it out. There's this weird thing about electrons. Everything else we figured out. Turns out we hadn't figured out anything. And he was out there changing that. Again, he wasn't the only one, but a mind like that, sure, would be really interesting. But I also appreciate, I don't know, maybe he'd be tired. Maybe he eats with his mouth open. Who knows? I am not a socializer.
I love it. And I here's what I do love also, the point that you made, lightning doesn't just strike twice or three times, by happenstance, but also, the notion that this is an example of somebody, and there are a few examples of people who not only had the spark and the idea, but got it into the common lexicon, got it, they built the thing, they conveyed the idea multiple times, which is not easy to do. I enjoy trying to watch and learn from those people because it is kind of magical.
I mean, this is the thing that I have learned as an advisor to graduate students. And I often talk about this. I talk about it in my new book. Why am I there? My grad students at UC Berkeley and elsewhere are brilliant. They're smarter than me.
Yep.
And for 5 to 7 years, 24/7, they study one thing. There are 5 or 6 other people in the world that might know this subject to the depth that they know it. For me, it's 1 hour a week at best, not even that. Why am I involved? They know everything. They understand nothing. I'm not there to teach them facts. They could go look them up in a library. And of course, in the modern world, they could just ask, pick your favorite LLM. I'm there to teach understanding. I'm there to teach how to explore the unknown. So it's not so much tell me about what's going on in the thing you discovered. If I wanted to study that, I'd have been an engineer. How did you explore the unknown? What do you do when there's a problem in front of you and all the world's faced in a different direction and you have to push forward on that? And more importantly to me, how do you teach that to other people so that they can explore the unknown and change the world? That's the thing to me. That's why I jokingly call myself a professional mad scientist. Is my job is to do that, but in sort of traditionally ignored areas. How do you reunite orphan refugees with their extended family? That's a question that is transformative if you could share how to solve a problem like that.
Well, and it strikes me, certainly, but it strikes me that this is actually kind of at the heart of some things that are fundamentally changing around education and critical thinking in today's era, right? Like, Vivienne, you made the point, setting aside that you're working with people who are one of a couple of experts in their domain in the entire world, right? Any of us can go to pick your favorite LLM search engine and get a superficial understanding of the facts. So, what is that thing that pushes beyond facts, pushes to understanding, and maybe pushes to exploration to try and do something different?
Well, I mean, this is what's been interesting in my career is, I get introduced on stages as an AI expert. I am not. I don't have a computer science degree. Thank God. It's not a science, and I'm a scientist. I'm also not a
Ooh,
data
fighting words.
scientist. I'm
Oh,
an
dang.
actual scientist. Um, our job as scientists, and the job of many scholars, is how do you explore the unknown within your discipline? Well, my discipline is people. I'm a cognitive scientist. I happen to be a computational or theoretical cognitive scientist. So I'm in this hoity-toity world of, can we start from first principles and figure out mathematical models that explain why we make the choices we make? Or how it is that an endocrinologist makes judgments about diabetes treatments, or why it is a brilliant kid from a poor neighborhood has a full ride scholarship to go to university and doesn't go. It seems so irrational if you don't understand how people work.
Right.
So in reality, what I do is I study intelligence, natural intelligence, artificial intelligence. Largely, I use the latter to study the former. And that's given me this sort of unique insight about, well, if Claude or Gemini or GPT has all the answers, and I don't mean like one narrow area. It has all of the answers for free in my pocket. or effectively, I let a dollar for a million tokens, then why am I there? What am I doing? And in my book, I talk about this idea of well-posed and ill-posed problems. A well-posed problem is a problem where we already know the answer. You know, question, answer. That's how we train students in schools.
Sure.
That's how we train AI. Sometimes the question and answer is, here's 10,000 words, and the answer is what's the next word. But it all boils down to question, answer. So we live in a world where now there's this thing that's better than human beings at well-posed problems. It's not perfect, but then neither are we. The question isn't, is AI perfect? It's in what domains does it outperform us? And the more well-posed a problem is, the more there's no reason to have a human doing the answer. Except if you don't know how to factorize a polynomial, if you don't, like the kind of nerds I hang around with, use orthogonality in common conversations about word, I think the chocolate eclair is really orthogonal to the trifle as a dessert, then you haven't had understanding these problems change the way you think. And the way you think is important because of the other class of problems, ill-posed problems. We don't even know what the question is. Forget the answer. Every problem of interest to me, even the ones that feel like we ought to understand it better than we do, is an ill-posed problem. And AI is terrible at it. Turns out we're terrible also, but we're the only game in town. And so when I study humans and machines solving problems, and even cooler, my current research, solving problems together, that's clearly where they bring their strengths. The AI brings the well-posed, the human brings the ill-posed, which they only got because they worked on well-posed stuff. And that dynamic does something amazing. I'm going to make a claim and maybe later we'll back it up. That right now is the smartest thing on the planet. This cyborg collective of humans and machines dynamically interacting is where problem solving in the future is going.
I don't actually think that's a controversial claim, although I do want to dig into it in a bit. But before we do, I want to ask you something that might be one of these really stupid questions. I don't know if it's well posed or not, but how I actually, how do you know that a question is well posed? How do you know that there is a known answer?
I mean, obviously, in a sense, it's well posed, maybe only in the sense that it's written down in a textbook somewhere, or it was in a training data set. So, as with all things, I mean, this is a truth once you really begin to study the philosophy of sciences, or just be a philosopher and say the problem of induction, we don't know anything. That's the sad truth about science. To quote a podcast of its own, we're just attempting to be less wrong over time. Doesn't matter how brilliant my ideas are, they will always be wrong. The question is how much utility I get out of them. So, from an epistemological sense, wow, we can crack this open and really get into the fuzziness of all of this stuff and statistical model free learning and model based and all of this complexity. But essentially, I'm just saying if any other person with a similar education would give the same answer as you, then that's probably a well posed problem. And that may have been, if that was an esoteric answer to a question that most people don't understand, that probably was the key to unlock a great job for long swaths of recent human history. And it's just not clear that it will be anymore. You know, a lot of what we need people to do and have always needed people to do isn't simply review this contract, look at this x-ray, write this code. It's, given the problem I'm solving, what's the right idea for how to code up this problem? Given this x-ray and this unique patient, what should we do and why might they be an outlier? And It just hasn't been profitable to think that way in the past because you just got a lot better by memorizing all of these well-posed answers to well-posed problems. And just the minute a patient walks in the door or a legal client, just sum them up. They look like their will template B. And you just pull it out and you write it up.
If we if excuse me, I have one more question. Sorry, Lane. If we accept, and you don't have to, but if we accept the quote unquote truth that innovation uh, inevitably leads to behavioral change, some kind of change, like, and as almost a part of the definition of innovation, then it strikes me that the only way to do that is to ask poorly posed questions and answer and get answers that are unexpected and novel. Is that fair?
I'm going to take it a step further. 100%. The only way to move forward. If by the very definition that a well-posed problem is one we already know the answer to, or at least we have collectively agreed to the answer to, then everything of interest is ill-posed, which means in a world with increasing, AI infiltration, then a lot of that well-posed work is gone and the ill-posed is what's left. And that could sound terrifying. If I'm telling everyone your job in the future is being an innovator, whatever your job was yesterday, that's the one thing won't be a job tomorrow. Because if that was economically valuable, then now something else is going to do it. They can learn faster than you and do it at greater economic value. So you need to explore the unknown. The wonderful thing about that story is the known is finite, the unknown is infinite. There will always be unknown, and there will always be ill-posed problems to explore. Here's where it gets more complicated, though. It isn't just about asking these, because again, the problem with ill-posed problems is we don't even know what the question is. How are we setting up the cultural system, the incentives? How are we building businesses or schools or any of it to make people want to explore the unknown?
And that's a tough one. I mean, that doesn't happen, right? I mean, like,
in a
that,
study that my wife and I published together, this was years ago, using long before LLMs came along, we did a natural language analysis of students in a discussion forum. So they could talk about anything. This was free-form text using some old school NLP, and we analyzed these discussions. The only thing they had to do was show up and they got full credit. We found at week 1, we knew what grade they would get in the course. And what's interesting is was not what distinguished the failing students from the passing students. It was pretty clear the failing students didn't show up at all. They showed up and talked about the weather. They talked to their friends. They didn't talk about the actual subjects. What was interesting is the difference between the B and the A students. The B students gave right answers regularly, on demand. If this was a pop quiz, they got full credit, and the A students didn't, because the A students would translate and explore. These were university students in the paper that we published, but we looked at other groups as well. So you're an MBA student in an economics course, and you're learning about collective bargaining. Well, the B student parrots everything they heard in class. The A student says, we talked a lot about auto workers, but let's think about what this means for nurses. And they're wrong, because nurses are different. But that exploration, our AI, our machine learning system, picked up that predicted not just a better grade in the course, it predicted that they would actually graduate sooner from university and get a better paying job for their first job out of school. So this is a huge thing, but keep in mind, again, there was no formal incentive. You got same credit for being right as wrong. And yet the vast majority of students that passed the course wouldn't be wrong in public, even as they saw the elite students engaging in this behavior. For 1,000 reasons, we train kids and adults to not take risks, to not be wrong, to not explore. And we could go on and on with this, but here's my provocative takeaway from research I did on collective intelligence. in the optimally intelligent community, including your company, the majority of people should be wrong the majority of the time. If they're not exploring enough. And to be clear, I mean productively wrong, but that's what has to be happening. If you haven't built in the culture and the incentives to make that happen, I guarantee you people are hurting around safe answers.
In your opinion, what does that culture, like building that culture and implementing incentives, look like?
So again, as a minor plug, I talk about this a bit in my upcoming book, which is out in March. And so I actually put in some this is not my traditional style. I like just exploring big ideas. I'm a sci-fi nerd. That's what got me into science in the first place. So telling people, here's the 5 things you need to do is not my style. But I literally have chapters titled How to Robot Proof Your Kids, How to Robot Proof Yourself, and How to Robot Proof Your Company. So I felt like I kind of needed something. So rather than rules, they were recipes. Here's a recipe. For example, for your kids, the recipe is the nemesis prompt. Don't ask Gemini to write your essay for you. Tell Gemini that it is your worst enemy. It has dogged your entire career and found every mistake you've ever made and pointed it out to the world. Instead of writing your essay, you then say, Gemini, my enemy, here is the essay I just wrote. Tell me everything I got wrong and how I can make it better.
Oh, I love
don't
this.
Let AI do your work for it. Here is my golden rule for our entire discussion. I call it the efficiency lie. Don't let AI make your life easier. Use AI to make your life harder in the ways that make you better. If you're a leader in an organization, particularly one dependent on innovation, and I'm going to argue that's going to be most organizations moving forward, then you need to really rethink this. Why hire a bunch of brilliant people and then tell them what to do? That'd be like me telling my grad students what to do. They know their problem better than me. I understand the problem better. I'm there to feel out the uncertainty. I'm there to role model. What do you do when you fail? So the kind of directives I give is essentially, 1, point out the power of role modeling, highly incentivize, culturally incentivize, productive failure. When people go out and do hard work to explore an idea that's probably wrong, but if it's not, it would change everything. And sure enough, it turns out to be wrong. That is valuable. It's valuable to your company and it's valuable to everyone else. Reward that. Whether that's monetarily or not doesn't really interest me as much, but I have things to say about it as a neuroscientist. But create systems that reward productive failure. And very few organizations engage in that.
Well, I think I'm almost hearing like a paradox here, though, because it's inherently in human nature to utilize something that makes your life easier. And right now, that's the way that people are using AI.
Yeah.
But what you're suggesting is that we should kind of fundamentally go against that nature. And so that's why I understand the need for incentive. But so what does the future of AI and the relationship between humans and AI look like if, like you said from your study with those students, that most of us are going to lean toward the way of just using it for what's easier, but not to challenge ourselves?
So it's interesting. You said, Ian, earlier, no one would disagree with me that the future of innovation is this dynamic. Here's where every major AI company is disagreeing with me. They're selling AI as an efficiency tool. Let it do all the boring work so you can do the amazing creative work. All right. Not to scare away any potential book buyers, but I think the one equation I actually have in my book, if my publisher allowed me to keep it in, they literally took out all of the dirty words. I was shocked. They let me keep in all of the dumb jokes and sci-fi references, but no dirty words apparently. And it's meaningfully reduced the actual
The word count.
workload of the
That's about
entire
an
book.
8% drop in the word. I love it.
Yeah, but in this book, I built what's called an elasticity of substitution model. So this is really traditional. You know, if you are
Yep.
recent Nobel Prize winner, Darren Acemoglu has this really notable paper with another famous economist, labor economist, David Otter, and they have this paper looking at what happens when AI and automation sort of enter into a skill-based market. Notice I said nothing about skills. High skill, low skill, what does AI care about any of that? Nothing. Low skill jobs are probably better protected because it's expensive. I don't want to build a robot to pick strawberries. I'm paying much less than a living wage. Note, no legal resident of the United States is willing to do that job. So the only reason anyone's ever going to build a robot to pick strawberries is because we don't allow anyone to come from other countries to do it anymore. So those jobs are better protected. Dishwashing robot, why would I ever do that? But AI's attacking the professional. I gave an interview to the Financial Times in 2015, maybe, and the title was "The Professional Middle Class is About to Get Blindsided." So this is not a new idea for me here. It's not about skill level. It's about this dimension of how well posed and ill posed a problem is. It's about creativity versus routine. And here's the thing, when we build this into the elasticity of substitution model, if the AI does the routine work, you don't get more creative labor for humans. You get more routine work. And that may sound paradoxical, but let me put it in really concrete terms. If an AI bot reads and writes your emails for you, shock of all shocks, you get more emails, not fewer.
Right.
Yeah.
And yet that is the dominant use case being pitched by so many organizations today is cognitive automation rather than cognitive augmentation. So when I say the future of innovation is humans and AI interacting together, I mean both of them working strictly on the creative side of the problem, with the AI doing integrative work on the well-posed and the humans with our unique qualities, such as a new term, perhaps for your audience, meta uncertainty. Humans are sensitive to our own levels of uncertainty. Donald Rumsfeld is wrong and he's right. There is unknown unknowns, but human beings are better and worse. There's real heterogeneity in the population about our sensitivity to that. So when we go out of the training set of even a massive model like Gemini 3, the AI starts falling apart fast and making things up or staying in the safe place of existing knowledge. Humans, paradoxically, because we have these narrow lives, because we don't get to see everything, we spend more of our innovation time out in the long tail, particularly those of us for whom it really comes naturally. We need to change education to make this meta uncertainty, to make foundation skills that allow for meta learning how to learn, the actual grist of education. Learn real things along the way. Learn what the Treaty of Versailles was about, or all of them. Learn about how to factorize a polynomial. While you're learning that, learn how to be resilient. Learn how to, if you're young enough, work hard on tasks that expand working memory, numeracy, and literacy. If you're older, work on communication skills, work on self-assessment. We can run through this long list of human factors that
Emotional
actually predict not just innovation, it predict how long you'll live, how happy you'll be. A sense of purpose is an astonishingly good predictor of an amazing and long life, including wealth and income levels. Like these are the things we should be training into kids. And as leaders of organizations and communities, these are the things we should be supporting, rewarding, role modeling inside our organizations.
Well, okay. What? So there are so many places I want to go here, but as a parent with young children, I want to talk kids for a second because, I think like many parents, I'm terrified about whether or not I'm properly preparing the kids for a wildly uncertain future. And as you said, and as our partner, Dr. Maher Hakim, has said multiple times in innovation talks, a lot of kids are born, all kids are born with not just curiosity, but a willingness to be wrong, a willingness to ask stupid questions, a willingness to do risky things. And we as society kind of beat it out of them, right? So
Yeah.
that's a classic innovation problem. But here's what I'm terrified of now after hearing you talk, Vivienne. It's not just that we beat out risk taking and introduce the concept of embarrassment, it's that we are exposing kids to tools that reduce friction in their lives and therefore reduce a sense of purpose. Oh my God, what the hell do I do?
Let me make this pointed, and I'll start with the tool for mostly for adults, and we can easily generalize in our heads. Every year, the Department of Engineering at UC Berkeley makes the terrible decision to allow me to give a talk to undergrads. And I give a talk about how to solve unsolvable problems to engineering entrepreneurship students. Well, one of the things I give them is this following challenge, and it starts with something I shared on social media. I loathe social media with a passion that dims the sun, but I do occasionally use it to broadcast research. And years ago, I shared this claim, just a claim at the time, there will be a statistically meaningful and genuinely worldwide meaningful increase in early onset dementia across the world. And it will be causally related to the use of automated navigation systems like Google Maps and others. I'm not saying this as Google is an evil organization. I'm just saying this is a perfect example. I travel all around the world. I use GPS to be like a native. I like to walk. I hate being in cars, trains, but walk is at the top. I'm wandering through the old town of some ancient city, in the southern Europe. How quickly? I have no idea which way I'm going. So it makes me better when I'm using it, but it makes me worse when I turn it off again. And sure enough, a few years afterwards, the research started to come in. People that relied more heavily on navigation systems were showing worse memory performance and evidence of early dementia. Interesting enough, even people that just are born into messy, complex cities, maybe Bratislava was one of them, but there was a city, or maybe it was Prague versus Chicago, total grid. Turns out people that grow up in these complex cities actually do better with complex navigational patterns, which is almost certainly good for their long-term cognitive health. Well, we don't have to explore anymore. So my challenge for my students is, how would you redesign Waze or Google Maps or Apple or any of these? So not only am I better when I'm using it, I'm better than where I started when I turned it off again. And I get a wave of sometimes clever ideas, sometimes not, but that's great.
What's a good one that you've gotten?
Again, they have to pitch ideas that are wrong to, I hate to break it to you, but there really are bad questions to ask in a class. But if you never ask them, you're never going to learn what's a good question. So, so I let them pitch. Then I like to offer the following, because I actively use this myself. It doesn't matter where I am, even here in Berkeley. I don't know if there's an accident on Shattuck Avenue that's going to snarl up traffic. So of course I turn on Google Maps and take a look. Then, having seen where I am and where I want to go, I try to beat it there by taking a different route. I think to myself, what do I know about Berkeley and Oakland that the masses of people using Google Maps do not? Maybe there's a left turn it wants me to do, an unprotected left turn that today of all days will be a nightmare because I know bump. So what do now I'm thinking, For the simple task of going across town, I'm actively thinking about it, and I'm not engaging in what we call, scientists call automaticity, where whenever you've arrived at a destination and you don't even remember driving there. That's terrifying, but that's a natural thing our brains do, because once you've codified something, why bother thinking hard about it anymore? Well, you should think hard about it because it literally keeps you healthy cognitively across your lifetime. So to any of you thinking about building technological systems for our lives, particularly the lives of kids, is it not only making them better when they're using it, but are they better than where they started when they turn it off again? A study of endocrinologists in Portugal showed that they are dramatically worse in doing colonoscopies now when you turn off the AI assistants. And a wide range of studies. This is like the golden rule of AI in education. If an AI tutor ever gives students the answers, they never learn anything, which has been replicated with LLMs. But people have been studying AI in education for 50 years. It's maybe the longest that applied AI, like the oldest applied AI field there are. And I'll tell you, Sam Altman does not seem to know anything about this field, because that's his pitch to the US Congress was, imagine every kid has their own AI tutor. Yeah, I can imagine that, because I read that science fiction book, The Diamond Age.
Yeah, that is Neil Stevenson. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who what by the side tangent. Have you Anathem?
I
Have you read
haven't
that?
read that one. Yeah, but yes.
That one was a mind twist for me. Okay, so look, you're busy absolutely terrifying me. But so I have a question. Is your message getting out there? Are there organizations are there organizations that are consciously thinking about the idea that, what is it? The sand makes the pearl. Friction and thought lead to better outcomes later versus just giving the answer. And maybe more tactically, for folks that are listening who are in positions of leadership, business, personal, whatever, who are as scared as I am right now, beyond internalizing these concepts, what can they do? What can they model for their organizations?
Yeah. So listen, there are things that we should fully automate away. Despite what I said earlier, I grew up in the Salinas Valley. John Steinbeck wrote books about the places that I grew up. Human beings shouldn't have to spend 16 hours a day in a field just to send money back to their families. But if we do automate all of that away, come up with something real for them to do. Rebuild every bridge in the United States and hire anyone who wants the dignity of work to help build them. So that's one thing, is let's stop lying to ourselves. There are the majority of people on this planet are not ready for the change that I have just described. This isn't an erasure of human potential. It's a simple reality that there's a lot of variability in the world, and we did not support them early in their lives when they really needed to make changes. So let's find something truly productive for everyone we're going to leave behind. I will tell you, this moment in history, whatever side of the political divide in the United States you happen to lie on, to my mind, was born in the 1990s when everyone was promised that globalization would make the world better.
Yeah.
And it did if all you cared about was the stock market. But it didn't if you were a coal miner and everyone was promising they were going to retrain you to be a software developer. Turns out you cannot take a 30-year-old coal miner and suddenly get a job at Google. That was a fantasy from day one. That it takes a long 30 years to build a human being. It only takes me 6 months to build a new generation of AI. That's bad math for humanity if we don't start early and make a change. So there's that blanket statement. We need to think of everyone and make certain they're a part of this. Otherwise, we violate the social contract. I'm scared of what comes next if we do that. Having said that, now how do we move forward here and see change? I do see organizations lean into it, but frankly, there's terror. so much management decision making is based on the same fear we're talking about for the individual
Mm.
employees. What do you want to do? What will my board reward? What will my CEO reward? It is its own kind of terror, managing uncertainty. But I'm telling you, if you are a manager at whatever level, that should be your job. Your job is to manage the uncertainty of the context so that the people getting the work done can manage the uncertainty of the problem. And it's easy to say and brutally hard to do. Because this is the thing I think this, again, fair to be honest about. This is hard. Everything I'm saying is hard. It's kind of in line with what I am saying, which is stop being shallow and go deep. Stop spending 200 milliseconds of cognitive energy deciding whether a video is interesting and swiping on it, and take some time to think, why don't I like that video? Or why do I? What does it mean about me? It doesn't have to be every video, but every now and then go deep. I won't take you down the detour, but we have amazing research showing that kids can spend as much time on social media as their peers and look great. And the reason is if you look at their metadata, they go deep. They aren't just swiping and pissing away their lives. They're thinking about the stuff that they're looking at. So, it's a privilege for us to be worried about our kids, because for many of us who might be listening to this podcast, your kids are already getting role modeling about what changing the world looks like and the value of working hard. They may well have some additional genetic endowments. They are definitely getting role modeled behavior about how to deal with this world. So here's my favorite close for this little concept. The best AI tutor never gives students the answers. It's Socrates. What an interesting thing. You say the answer is X. These people said the answer is X. These other people said it was Y. Here's some really interesting things you might want to read about them and some questions you might want to think about. So if it's X, then what does that suggest about Z? And it only gives context. Amazing enough, in a series of experiments, first with old school AI tutors and now with LLM, found exactly this sort of AI tutor is the only one where pre-test, post-test, students outperform students that had no AI at all. So we can dream, we can indulge in the imagination disease. I can imagine a perfect student that uses it the way Vivienne's talking about. Therefore, we're done. We solved the problem. No, you solved the problem for 1/10 of 1% of the world population. The other 99.9 needs something different, something that will give them the scaffolding. And I'm here to tell you, so do your employees, similar percentages.
So Ian and I can tell we're slightly terrified, but it sounds like you're actually like quite hopeful. Like you're out there sort of fighting the good fight and doing the work to promote this and get the messaging out there. How likely do you see a positive future, and how likely are we to listen to this and put it into action?
I am an AI realist. I have equal scorn for the utopianists and dystopianists. AI isn't a magic wand. I am not Hermione Granger. You sprinkle GPUs and TPUs on a problem and they do not go away. This idea of AI superintelligence suddenly magically solving all problems, even frankly, as a cognitive scientist, the idea that current agentic AI are reasoning models is
Right.
to me an absurd abuse of the word reason. That is very little similarity to human explicit reasoning, which it is implying. We can get, again, nerdy about model free learning and model based, but that's for the nerds that really want to go deep on this. But what it can do is amazing. So and here's another point of disdain I have for the utopianists and the dystopianists, they seem to share one fundamental characteristic, which is a disdain for humanity. Humans can't be trusted with this stuff. No human can, or only I can, defines whether you're on one side of this or the other. I truly believe because of my life. I forgive me, anyone who's ever heard me share this story before, but it's worth pointing out, especially if you're terrified right now as a parent. When I was little, I was supposed to win the Nobel Prize. My dad didn't get a chance to win. He was born a
Little, that's
sharecropper in
pressure.
nowhere, Kansas. Like Dorothy has never heard of where my dad was from. The Vietnam War sort of changed the trajectory of his life. He was brilliant, but he got a full scholarship everywhere and didn't go. I mean, he went to KU, tutored Wilt Chamberlain in not in basketball, in chemistry.
Oh,
And but Vietnam changed the trajectory of his life. He was a flight medic and became a doctor in California. So then I grew up the child of a doctor in coastal California. All the potential he had and all of the opportunity he didn't. And I ended up homeless. I spent a significant chunk of
wow.
the 1990s not knowing where my next meal was coming from. 49 cents is the price of a box of rice-a-roni back then, because it meant 2 quarters and I got to eat.
Wow.
All self-inflicted. Then in 1999, I got my life back together and I went back to the same school I'd flunked out of, and I did my whole undergraduate degree in a single year, and I got perfect scores in every course. And what I got introduced to was this place called the Machine Perception Lab with the PIs of Paul Ekman, who passed away recently, and Terry Sinofsky, the student of John Hopfield, that Nobel Prize winner, doing with $5 million from the CIA to build AI models to analyze people's faces to tell if they were lying or not. I'm a sci-fi nerd. That's what I did when I was homeless, is I read science fiction and fantasy books. That kept me alive. Now I had the chance not simply to study people, but to build science fiction technologies to study
Wow. Yeah.
people. And I went on to continue to do that in graduate school. And if CIA funded lie detector sounds ethically complex to you, note that I got to take what I learned in doing this and build a system to reunite orphan refugees with their extended family members. I got to take it for Google Glass behind me here and build a system for autistic kids to learn how to read facial expressions based on what I learned in that open science project. That's why I'm bullish on what AI can do. I fundamentally believe everybody on this planet, in their own way, can do what I do. I have my unique strengths.
Mhm.
Everybody has their unique strengths. Turns out, importantly, everyone has their own unique weaknesses as well. That turns out to be a big predictor of life outcomes, is coming to terms with that and figuring out ways of dealing with it. That's what I did through those hard years in the 90s, and then I got a chance to grow up. When I see what I can do, I have an itch to scratch, and I'm the chief scientist of a company called Guild, and I've got data on 122 million working professionals. Why do women get paid less than men? Every labor economist in the world, including some of those Nobel Prize winners I mentioned earlier, have papers about this, and they all
Mhm.
come to the same finding: women work fewer hours than men. So if
Mhm.
you're a more progressive economist, we need better family leave policies. If you're a conservative economist, you say, look, it's not my fault. I didn't do anything wrong. Um, what I look at that and I say, what are women literally from Venus? Why are rational people making seemingly irrational choices? They worked hard to get that job, and now suddenly out of nowhere, they're choosing not to work as hard. They all wanted to suddenly raise families and they'd never thought about that before. Come on. So I built a bunch of AIs. They crawled through the websites of 60,000 companies and all the data we collected. And 2 days later, I had novel insights that no one had ever published before about why women choose to work fewer hours than men on the job. Um, Imagine when I did this work in 2015, the army of research assistants, the masses of data, the years
Yeah.
it would have taken to do that research. 2 days. But again, I didn't build an AI that did the hard work for me. I built it, no LLMs back then. I had to build it all by hand. I built it, ran it, explored the results, reconfigured the models, ran it again, reconfigured. This dynamic of human and machine working creatively together, I've seen what people can do when cyborgs, this fundamental integration of human machine truly becomes achievable, rather than it does the boring stuff or the scary deprofessionalization of, well, once it's doing the boring stuff, why do we even need someone with a fancy degree doing the job at all? Why don't we just
Right.
hire a high school grad and have the Jiffy Lube colonoscopy?
that's a that's an image we're not going to get out of our head. But okay, so I have a big question and maybe a smaller but important question. The first one, what did your research tell you, and where do people go and read about it in terms of the answer to the ill-posed question?
So
Why do rational actors
I
choose to work
haven't
less?
mentioned any book titles yet. Behind me, if you can make it out, there's
Yes.
a couple of posters. The one in yellow, Robot Proof: When Machines Have All the Answers, Build Better People. March.
March 2026.
Yes, that is coming out in a few months. I think anyone that has heard this is, I think, legally obligated to not only buy copies for themselves, but to pre-order for all of their Christmas list. Um, Feel free to throw in Hanukkah list. I mean, honestly, isn't this better than socks? So then the next book after that will be one of two, because they're already all written. Because to me, I'm not really writing books. I'm just telling stories out of my research. So really, the gist is, I tell the story of doing the research. Um, some of these is literally the story of my son being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and me hacking all of his medical equipment and breaking all sort of US regulations and
Mm.
building the first AI for diabetes. Some of it is the story of really grounded topic specific research. So the next two books, we'll figure out the order, probably depends on the appetite of America, is The Tax on Being Different,
Mm-hmm.
which will house this research that I just referred to about gender wage gap, and Small Sacrifices. The subtitle of that book is The Science, Economics, and Story of Purpose.
Oh,
Is bookended by two amazing experiments I did inside massive organizations. I'm crazy enough to consider helping giant multinationals to be a philanthropic venture, as long as I get to tell everyone what I did. Um, and so that one really looks at the worst about what makes people people, and the best of what makes people people, and how, in fact, we are exactly that same person all the time. And it is the context that makes us that terrible person or that amazing person. But I'm a hard number scientist, so it's, what would a mad scientist say about the concept of purpose? So the answer, um, the biggest answer came from facial recognition. When it crawled out across the databases of the companies of all these websites,
Mm-hmm.
the number of female faces on the leadership team was the single biggest predictor of the single biggest covariate of gender wage gap, controlling
Yep.
for programs, controlling for all sorts of different variables. If there particularly was a female CEO or CFO, younger women inside the organization put in more hours. Um, and
Fascinating.
you could measure it causally when a new um, um, CEO came in, regardless of change in policy, young women put in more hours into their job. They work hard, but the question is, are they going to work 70 hours hard on their job because they love it? Or are they going to work 50 hours hard on their job and put 20 hours into the church or into a social mission because they looked up and thought, I have no evidence that working hard is going to pay off. I know intellectually. So this is me, the cognitive neuroscientist. When I look at human behavior and I look at how our knowledge, our explicit knowledge about the world, and our implicit beliefs born of our lived experience, when those two diverge, our behavior invariably tracks with beliefs, not with knowledge. So when you hear these brilliant students passing up scholarships saying, yeah, I get it, I understand, they do, they understand. It's not a marketing problem. The problem is they have no lived experience that
Yep.
going off to another planet and hanging out at MIT is actually going to change their lives. And that drives their choices so much more than their brilliance does. And you see it in young women inside organizations, and you see it across so many different domains. In fact, here's forgive me, I'm on my soapbox now. Here's a broad claim. Most of the complex problems I work on aren't technical problems. They are simply, we are mistaken about how people make choices in their lives. And it's
Yes.
hiding often simple technical solutions from us because we just can't imagine a brilliant kid would pass up a full scholarship. We can't imagine a hardworking young woman wouldn't want to continue to put in hours, even if there was no obvious evidence. By the way, I'm not talking about whether you've ever been felt up in the office before, which I've never seen in a labor economics paper.
Yep.
All of these domains in which I work often boil down to this imaginary world in which we try to solve problems and the real world that desperately needs our help.
And I mean, that is utterly fascinating. And I think we could probably spend another 7 hours on the topic of how people make decisions and how they perceive the world. But, it is really interesting because I can connect it to moments in my life when people around me and in my family have made very unexpected decisions. And there's one that I thought I'd share because I think this is interesting. This is an extended family member who grew up in, frankly, tougher economic circumstances, was not exposed. There was taken from her parents, things like that. And it's interesting. And at some point when I was much younger, I had a well-paying white-collar job. And I said, look, like, you're in your teenage years. I think one of the most important things anyone can do is go explore. Here's a free plane ticket. Here's free cash to, live the hostel life for a month. That was 15 years ago, and that offer has still not been accepted. And it has always blown my mind. And I love this person. What I did not come to realize until I'd say the last few years, but even this puts crystallization on it, is like, this person had no lived experience to understand why I believed that was such an amazing opportunity and why it would change their life. And it is really interesting. So, like, I guess I don't even know where I'm going with this. I'm telling the story because I think it makes a lot of sense, but I guess,
I mean, here's a fascinating parallel. There was this paper that I don't remember exactly how it came to me. I follow Tyler Cowen's blog, who's sort of this notable libertarian economist, partially because I don't agree with him a lot. But I think he's a reasonable person. I don't need everyone. It is true. I am always right, but I'm a big enough person to allow other people to be wrong. So I'm happy to allow Tyler to be wrong in my feed regularly. So I think he must have shared this paper that was an argument in favor of payday lenders. And the experiment
That's wild.
The experiment that they ran was a check on the rationality of actual people that regularly use payday lenders. And sure enough, in their experiment, these people were very accurate about whether they would need it again in the future, their ability to repay. Again, you ask them all of these explicit knowledge questions, they were right on. If that was the whole story, they have a reasonable argument. I might still quibble with the value of payday lenders for a variety of reasons, but at least your argument that people should be allowed to make their own choices is supported. In a footnote in the appendix, they noted that they motivated the participation of the people in the study by offering them a $200 Amazon gift card. Now, these are people regularly going to a payday lender to make ends meet. $200 free dollars. They mentioned that I think their statement was 60% of the gift cards were not redeemed. That's the headline. Like, that should be the abstract of the study. It should say everything they just said. Unfortunately, 50% of gift cards were not received means our entire study is bunk.
I'm looking
Um,
at Lane's face
Wow.
here, and Lane is as stunned as I am.
Yeah.
so, and we can look on the other end. Here's another of my favorite crazy findings. You look at fund managers and how they shift investment money around.
Mhm.
And what they found, I love this because it's so absurd that in Europe, European based fund managers, say a Norwegian moves their money out of companies headquartered in Eurovision competition countries. It's not a huge effect, but it is statistically detectable. Tell me again how people managing the trillions of dollars in our financial system are always 100% rational because they got real money on the table.
Nobody's rational.
Nobody's rational. We are human. In fact, I'm going to make an argument. All cognitive systems are biased. You cannot build an unbiased AI. You cannot build an unbiased human or cockroach or rat or monkey. All systems are biased because my definition of intelligence is any system that can make decisions under uncertainty. If you already knew the answer, then, we might call that robotic process automation. It's no longer an intelligent system if you're simply a robot on a factory line doing the exact same thing every time. It requires bias
But
mathematically.
do machines augment human rationality in this cyborg model, in this model where machines help build better people? Or is that kind of just a false question?
So let me offer two studies, one mine, someone else's. I'll do the other one first. They are both what I'm going to call evidences of hybrid collective intelligence, or HI, hybrid intelligence. These are the cyborg collectives I referenced earlier. I can think of 4 existing papers plus mine, which hasn't come out, but it's time to come out with the book. 2 of those papers are in medical research. I'm happy to share the links so you can post them in the show notes. One is in product development, and I'm blanking on the last one, but I'll come back to it.
Okay.
Mine is in human beings competing against prediction markets, individual humans or teams of humans competing against
Okay.
poly.
In a world of polymarket, this is quite a thing.
Yeah. So in the I think the best case in the study of medical diagnostics, this paper that I believe was in PNAS, but I could be wrong, and I will dig it up for show notes. What they found was when they put together teams of humans and teams of machines, that they made complementary errors. That's a phrase right out of the title of the paper. So that the process was humans, all the diagnostic data comes in, humans make notes, AI collects it. It presents an initial observation. Humans riff off of it, take it to new places. AI collects it, makes new observations. That system outperforms everything else. It's the smartest thing on the planet today. That's a big argument. Isn't, NYSE the smartest thing on the planet or Polymarket? Well, here's where my research comes in. It's still ongoing. So I can't make the absolute claim until we finished all the analyses and it comes out. But the trend so far is we bring people into a room. We give them an hour. They are given 30 issues off of Polymarket. And that have some resolution criteria. So we know what we can just track Polymarket, see whether our people were accurate or not. So we have people by themselves, AIs by themselves, people interacting with AI, and then a special condition, people interacting with a specially designed agentic model. Humans are not great. Like, these are smart
Yeah.
but naive people. Of course, they aren't going to outperform Polymarket on these issues. The AIs are better as a rule, as a sort of generic rule. AIs tend to perform better even than maybe teams of humans. They only have an hour and they have to go through 30 items. So the machines are just better at that kind of time pressure. The best of the AIs plus the humans appear to be at least competitive with Polymarket for judgments made in a single hour's worth of time with no pre-study, and best when the outcomes are unexpected. The things that are the most interesting. But here's the most fascinating of our findings. It's not the generation of the LLM that matters. You could use, GPT-5 or Gemini 3. I use Gemini 3 a lot in my work since a lot of it is very nerdy bio stuff, and I think Google probably has a better handle there. That versus an open source model, a Lambda model or even a condensed model, doesn't matter that much. It's a detectable difference, but it doesn't matter that it's the human capital on the team that matters. And effectively, it matters in the way that interests me as a nerdy scientist. It's a dynamical system. When you have enough human capital on the team, there's like a phase transition. They don't just take what the AI says, they interact dynamically with it. And they
Doesn't this validate the concept of prediction markets?
Discovered. Does it invalidate or validate? What was there?
Invalidate. Doesn't this kind of reinforce the basic thesis of the prediction markets, which are trying to aggregate the maximum amount of human capital into this kind of machine-assisted decision-making?
Absolutely. I just think it's really interesting that without being able to see the collective intelligence of the prediction market, because they're not getting to look at, all they're getting is the questions. What will the price of oil be above or below this threshold? Will Russia accept a treaty by this date? All these sorts of different questions. And when those questions resolve, our smart humans plus AI look in an hour's time, look very competitive with the full scope of Polymarket.
That is utterly fascinating. But you have to give the hour's time.
Implications about what was that?
I was going to say, but you have to give the hour's time. Like, your key point is you have to give the hour's time, the back and forth, the interaction, and the engagement with the ill-posed question, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Here's some interesting findings. The study, there's this fascinating sort of Procter & Gamble study is another one of these domains. The headline finding there was one person with an AI can outperform a whole team. It was like a hackathon inside Procter & Gamble, and they bring in engineers and market people, and they work together like strangers, and they have to come up with products and so forth. And it is true, a person with an AI, more particularly an engineer with an AI to replace a marketing pair, did as well as an engineer and a marketing person. So that was almost the entire effect, was a lift of the engineer to come up with this better product pitch, essentially. But what that should have been the headline, if you dug into the findings from the paper, was teams of people working with AIs, not first order. Did judges judge their idea to be better or worse? Human judges are wildly swayed by how slick the marketing copy is. LLMs are great at that. Did the idea get selected for development? Did it win an award at the pitch competition? The human plus AI teams were 3 times as likely as any other combination to get selected to go on and meet the world. In additional research by other groups, humans co-developing arguments or writing essays with AI support wrote more persuasive arguments, and learned more, and other people learned more from their essays. Cyborgs. This is when I was going off to study in grad school. I told people I want to build cyborgs. And they justifiably scooted away from me for fear that the crazy would rub off and none of us would get in. It's actually a field called neuroprosthetics, but I like the word cyborgs more.
Sure.
I want us all to be the Borg, but in a good way.
Not a Skynet way.
Yeah. And okay, so maybe I don't want us. I want us to be the Borg, but I want the cybernetics to actually augment what makes us different.
Yeah, the individuality.
So I alluded
Yeah.
to this. In my study, we had that special case of a specially designed agentic AI. First, it didn't give answers. Second, its job was to push the humans apart, push them to create their own unique insights. Don't allow two people to talk together and agree with each other. Make them think about it on their own before they bring their ideas back. It was trained to do a kind of ideation
Interesting take.
integration phase, and that includes itself. Don't let the humans just take your answers and run with it. And even in lower human capital team, that AI that gave less information and therefore should be worse, they were also had that elevated performance. So we can build AIs that make people better. If we do that, I'm bullish on the future of humanity. I'm not a futurist. I run a philanthropy called the Human Trust, and people bring me challenging problems and I help them for free. That's my day job. But the reason I am able to do this is because of the dumb luck that I got introduced to this field in 1999 when nothing in my life was going right and everything transformed. So what I want to say, rather than this is how the future is going to be, is this is a choice we have. We can stay shallow or we can go deep. We can make this choice collectively as a society. You can make it individually as companies. I'm just saying the shallow is a dead end. And as mentioned already, I'm always right about everything.
Vivienne, I want to keep this going for forever, but I think that last sentiment was the answer to my question for the final question of this talk, which was, what's the big piece, the big takeaway for our listeners here? And I think you hit the nail right on the head. If folks want to follow you, I know that you don't like social media with the passion of the sun, but if they wanted to follow you, connect with you, pre-order
if
your
your
book.
Self-appointed day job is to help people for free, you got to kind of be available. So if you go to socos.org, SOCOS.org, you can sign up for my free newsletter. If you're a fool, you can sign up for my paid newsletter. In the first one, I just share research I think is interesting. In the second one, I talk about what I would do with that research. You'll learn about my book. You'll find out where you can follow me on social media, where I will invariably share my science fiction and fantasy book picks.
Amazing. Well, Vivienne, we'll get that in the show notes. I am sure you've got new followers. You've got new followers here in the hosts of this podcast, and we really appreciate you coming on Innovators Inside. I want to say thank you for your time. It was a fun and fascinating conversation, and I want to just wish you the best as we head into the weekend and into the end of the year.
It was a blast, and I didn't even need to tell any dirty jokes. Maybe my publisher's right. No more dirty words.
Part two. That's part two. We're going to bring you back, and it's the whole episode, dirty jokes.
Well, the sick and twisted version of the show.
Yeah, love
Can't wait. Can't wait.
Nothing but AI necrophilia.
And that's our outro. Thanks so much, Vivienne. It was an absolute pleasure.